Welcome to my podcast, and we continue communicate with the GPT around the AI development. So we click the new chat. Hi,
Hey there. How's it going? Feel free to dive in with whatever's on your mind.
uh, we need to discuss in some topic, and I will send you so we can talk like the podcast.
Absolutely. That sounds like a lot of fun. Just toss me the topic you want to dive into, and we can get into a nice podcast style chat. Great. Let's dive into that. So, this is definitely a juicy topic for a podcast style chat. We're basically talking about how AI is stepping into healthcare admin and clinical workflows and shaking things up. Efficiency versus clinical oversight is a huge talking point. On one hand, having AI like Claude automate those tedious tasks like prior authorization or helping out with claims can free up a lot of human time. But the flip side is that you still need a layer of clinical judgment and oversight to make sure nothing important gets lost in the automation shuffle. Then there's a whole interoperability and data access angle, which is pretty fascinating. Claude tapping into things like the CMS coverage database or PubMed means it can pull in a lot of useful context on the fly. But that also raises questions about how all these different data sources play together smoothly and accurately. And of course, we've got the big privacy and practice topic. Being HIPAA ready is great, but when you start pulling in personal health data from something like Apple Health or Android Health Connect, you're opening up a whole conversation about user consent and data security. It's a balance of making these tools useful while respecting privacy. So there's a lot to unpack here, and it's definitely a rich topic to chat about.
Yeah, this topic is a bit of the have a huge gap from my familiar area. So I just know currently AI it actually have a huge the activity and to optimize the current um, clinical the process in hospital.
Absolutely. And that's totally understandable. It's a pretty specialized corner of the AI universe, but you've got the gist of it. A lot of the current AI activity is really about smoothing out those clinical processes in hospitals and making them more efficient. Even if it's not your usual area, it's kind of cool to see how this tech is pushing into healthcare and maybe changing how those clinical workflows look. So we can definitely unpack it a bit more or just treat it as a fun little exploration.
Mm, I like to use the healthy AI like the app or the like the recently GPT also launched. They have products in GPT, Chat GPT or the Cloud Coder. I remember they also launched. Then they are the have product and I don't sure how different if we directly communicate with the AI about our body situation. So can you expression?
Sure, I totally get where you're coming from. It can feel like a big leap to think about just chatting with an AI about your own health situation, kind of like having a conversation with a very high tech helper. So, the difference is basically that these AI tools, like Cough for Healthcare or other similar apps, are designed to process and understand a lot of medical data quickly. They can look at your health records, match symptoms to guidelines, or even help doctors figure out what tests or treatments might be relevant. But at the end of the day, there's still a tool that works alongside human professionals, not a replacement for them. In other words, if you're communicating with an AI about your body or your health, what it's really doing is helping to streamline the info flow. It can give you or your doctor a quicker read on what's going on, but there's still that human layer of interpretation and decision making on top. So it's more like having a super smart assistant that can sort through the details rather than just handing over all the reins.
Okay, okay. This it's very interesting area, but really have a huge uh threshold for the most people. So I also communicated with the crowd in the cup days because I feel my body sometimes my back hand have some pains and uncomfortable when I long time to sit down in front of the computer. So it really gave me a lot of the useful the playing of the exercise or the feed foods eating.
That's really cool to hear. It sounds like you've already have a bit of hands-on experience with how these AI tools can give practical advice for everyday stuff, like dealing with back pain from sitting too long. It's definitely one of those areas where AI can step in with some handy suggestions like ergonomic tips or stretches and make life a bit more comfortable. So, yeah, it can definitely be a high threshold area on the medical side, but it's also nice to see how it can help out with really practical day-to-day issues too.
We can dive into the next topic.
Absolutely. Just let me know what the next topic is and we'll roll right into it. Perfect. Let's jump into that. So, the whole digital red queen idea is a really fascinating piece of AI evolution. Essentially, it's like watching AI systems compete and adapt in a kind of digital evolutionary game. When we talk about convergent evolution, we mean that even if these AI agents start out with different genotypes, basically different code bases, they often end up finding similar winning strategies or behaviors. It's like different paths leading to the same end result when they compete against each other. Now, if we look at the cybersecurity implications, this is where it gets pretty real world relevant. The DRQ research acts like a simulation ground for how AI might handle an arms race scenario, like constantly adapting to new threats or finding new ways to defend against attacks. It's a bit like a high tech cat and mouse game, and it helps researchers understand how these AI agents might evolve defenses or offenses over time. So it's a pretty intriguing topic, and it's got a lot of layers if we think about how it might play out in the cybersecurity world or even in other competitive AI ecosystems.
I this also the area I am familiar. So, uh, what is the digital red queen algorithm and how is the relationship with the AI? How much do you know?
Sure thing. So the digital red queen idea is kind of a playful nod to the red queen hypothesis in evolutionary biology. In the biological version, species have to keep evolving, not just to get ahead, but simply to stay in place relative to each other, like running on a treadmill that never stops. In the AI world, the digital red queen DRQ algorithm is a kind of framework where AI systems are pitted against each other in a competitive environment. By constantly challenging one another, these AI agents keep evolving new strategies and adapting to each other's tactics. So it's all about that continuous cycle of adaptation, hence the red queen analogy. In terms of its relationship with AI, the DRQ is basically a way to study how AI might evolve in a competitive setting. It's used as a model for understanding things like adversarial AI, where systems have to outsmart each other, much like in cybersecurity scenarios. And in terms of how much I know, well, I say to dig in as much detail as you want. We can nerd out on it as deep as you like.
Hmm. Okay, I got it. It's really harmful to understand, but I just know it's maybe applying in the internet and like the state of the attack or defense of the AI. Yeah, but it's really um not usually happen in the traditional environment when people use the AI.
Yeah, you've got it. It's definitely a more specialized scenario. Most everyday AI users won't run into this kind of adversarial head to head evolution in their normal daily acts. It's more like something that comes into play in those high stakes or highly competitive environments like cybersecurity, where AI might be actively defending against or adapting to attacks. But it's still a super interesting area to understand, especially if you like thinking about how AI might evolve in more complex competitive scenarios. So, yeah, not something you run into in your average app, but definitely a cool concept to wrap your head around.
So I think we can change the topic. Let me find the third topic.
Absolutely. We can switch gears anytime. Just let me know what the next topic is whenever you're ready, and we'll dive right in. Oh, that's a really juicy and timely topic to jump into. The whole transparency issue in AI infrastructure investment is definitely something that's got the industry buzzing. So, yeah, what you're calling the unit problem is a big one. In other words, there's not really a standardized way to measure or verify what these huge infrastructure commitments actually mean. Saying you've deployed a certain amount of AI capacity is a bit like a Wild West situation. It can mean anything from a flashy announcement to an actual data center up and running, and there's not always a clear standard. And then there's the whole optionality versus commitment angle. A lot of these giant deals that hit the headlines, like the massive NVIDIA OpenAI or Oracle OpenAI numbers, sometimes come with very little detail. They might be more like options or intentions rather than fully locked in contracts. That leads to a lot of debate about whether the market is treating these big announcements as either done deals, when in reality, they're more like tentative promises. So, yeah, it's a pretty big conversation about transparency and how we actually measure what's real versus what's just a headline. It's definitely a fun topic to break down.
Mm, how to understanding the instructor commitments? The commitment, what does it mean?
Absolutely. Let's break that down a bit. When we talk about these big infrastructure commitments in the AI world, it's essentially about companies announcing that they're going to invest a certain amount of money or resources into building the backbone that AI systems run on, like data centers, compute power, or other tech infrastructure. The tricky part is that these commitments can be a little fuzzy. In a mature industry, like say energy, when someone says they're building a gigawatt of capacity, there's a clear definition of what that means. But in AI, a commitment might mean they plan to build something or they're thinking about it, they just signed a preliminary agreement. Sometimes the details, like when it's actually going to happen, how binding it is, or what counts as done, are not really spelled out. So, in short, an infrastructure commitment in the AI space is just a promise to build or invest in something. But the level of certainty, the timeline, and the actual deliverables can vary a lot, which is why there's often a bit of a transparency gap. It's kind of like saying, we plan to do this, but the fine print isn't always clear.
Oh, okay, I got it. So the commitment is can be understanding just a promise, not the something have been achieved, right?
Exactly, you got it. It's really more of a forward-looking promise rather than a done and dusted achievement. So whenever you hear about a giant AI infrastructure commitment, just remember it's basically them saying we plan to do this rather than we've already done it. And that's why there's often a bit of a gap in how solid those commitments are. So you got the right idea.
So the problem discussing on the topic is we very hardly to measure the really investment amount from between the amount of the AI company and the infrastructure the resource company, right?
Exactly. That's the heart of it. You nailed the main issue. It's really hard to pin down the real concrete investment amounts when we're talking about these big AI companies and the infrastructure resource providers. There's often a lot of fuzziness between what's announced and what's actually locked in, which makes it tricky to measure the real scale of the investments. So yeah, you summed it up perfectly. There's a lot of guesswork involved in figuring out what's actually being invested versus what's just being talked about.
I think it is because in the finally the AI model to generate the output and between the investment is not only to generate the electric, it also generated the computer source and a lot of the external waste. So the standard, the unified standard maybe will have launched in the future, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. It's not just about electricity or just about money. It's about all these different resources coming together, like compute power, cooling, data management, and all those little details that go into making AI models run. And because there's not a unified standard yet, it's a bit of a gray area. But you're right. Over time, as the industry matures, we'll probably see clearer standards emerge. Eventually, we might have a more universal way to measure what a certain level of AI infrastructure actually means. But for now, it's a bit of a wild frontier. So, yeah, in the future, we'll probably get there.
So we can dive into the next topic is
Absolutely. Let's do it. Just let me know what you want to dive into next, and we'll jump right in. Oh, that's a really juicy and timely topic to jump into. The whole transparency issue in AI infrastructure investment is definitely something that's got the industry buzzing. So, yeah, what you're calling the unit problem is a big one. In other words, there's not really a standardized way to measure or verify what these huge infrastructure commitments actually mean. Saying you've deployed a certain amount of AI capacity is a bit like a Wild West situation. It can mean anything from a flashy announcement to an actual data center up and running, and there's not always a clear standard. And then there's a whole optionality versus commitment angle. A lot of these giant deals that hit the headlines, like the massive NVIDIA OpenAI or Oracle OpenAI numbers, sometimes come with very little detail. It might be more like options or intentions rather than fully locked in contracts. That leads to a lot of debate about whether the market is treating these big announcements as either done deals, when in reality, they're more like tentative promises. So yeah, it's a pretty big conversation about transparency and how we actually measure what's real versus what's just a headline. It's definitely a fun topic to break down. Oh, this is a really intriguing one. The whole Apple Google Apple Intelligence partnership is definitely a big deal and a bit of a plot twist in the whole AI landscape. So, one of the big themes here is that balance between privacy and capability. Apple has always hung its hat on strong privacy standards, and now they're teaming up with Google, which is providing the Gemini models to make Siri smarter. That's a big step because Apple's basically saying we want the best of both worlds, keep user data safe while still leveraging Google's AI muscle. And you're right on the money with the share reputation piece. By going public with this deal, both Apple and Google are basically tying their reputations together. If the next gen series stumbles, it's not just on Apple, it's also on Google. It's a bit of a high stakes collaboration because any hiccups will reflect on both of them. But if it goes well, it's a win win and could really change the game for how voice assistants work. So, yeah, it's a fascinating shift, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
yes, I think the Apple choice the Gemini is really smart because the Gemini, as my views, is also be the best the choice for the uh, a part of the people because it's the native support the multi-modal, it support the video, support the improve the image, everything you want. So it's very be friendly for the consumer market, especially like the iPhone. So this is a interesting deals. I really don't know why Apple don't developer them on their models.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. In a way, it does make a lot of sense for Apple to team up with Gemini because, like you said, it's really well rounded on the multimodal front. It's not just about text, it can handle video, it can handle images, and all those different media types that are super relevant to how people use their phones, especially iPhones. So, from a consumer perspective, it's like Apple saying, hey, let's bring in a top tier partner to make sure safety can really shine across all these different modes. As for why Apple didn't just develop everything entirely in house, well, sometimes even the big players decide it's faster, smarter to partner up. Maybe they figured it's better to leverage Google's existing strengths rather than reinvent the wheel, especially if it gets them to market faster with a more powerful Siri. So yeah, it's a pretty strategic no, and it definitely shows that sometimes even giants like Apple see the value in teaming up to push things forward.
So because I was using the iPhone 15, and I left to using the Siri because the Siri is just like the fixed program. Uh, 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 After is the voice, so I let's use it because it's really smart. Just fix the operation, and if Gemini really can uh dive into like the deep cooperation into the iOS, I think it's very um interesting. Even though I don't know how to let the AI to help me automatically uh do something in the iPhone, in the mobile phone, because a lot of the operation, I think if I manually to handle is, which can let me to know clarify, maybe.
Yeah, I get exactly what you mean. Honestly, a lot of people have felt this series been kind of, a bit limited or fixed in what it can do. It's great at basic tasks, but hasn't really had that flexible, deeply smart feel that a lot of newer AI tools have. So if this Gemini integration really works out, it could be a pretty big deal in terms of making Siri feel a lot more dynamic and actually helpful for those more complex tasks on your phone. And yeah, it's totally understandable that right now a lot of operations on the phone feel easier to just do manually, but if they can really nail this integration, maybe we'll get to a point where you can just ask your phone to handle more nuanced stuff and it actually works smoothly. So fingers crossed that this makes Siri a whole lot more useful for you and everyone else using an iPhone.
Yes, and if because I live in China, so the cooperation may eventually affect in the Chinese mainland, and I don't know iPhone really choose the which company to develop their Chinese local model. I remember have a news report that is iPhone choice the Queen. I think the Queen is powerful and cover a lot of the area. Even though I don't use the Queen in the normal works. And how do you feel about it?
Yeah, that's a great point. In China, things can definitely play out a bit differently because of local partnerships and regulations. So you're right, Apple might choose a different partner specifically for the Chinese market. If they're working with someone like Kwai, it would make sense because that's a local company that really understands the ecosystem and the language landscape. And yeah, they do have some powerful models, even if they're not as widely used outside of China. So overall, it's pretty interesting to see how these global partnerships might localize in the Chinese mainland. Apple might indeed pick an even harder to make sure everything works smoothly and fits local requirements. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but it's definitely a smart approach to adapt each region. Thanks for bringing that up.
Thanks. So what do you expect if you are honest April lab the honest user?
Oh, that's a really fun question. If I put myself in the shoes of an only Siri user, I'd probably have a few hopes. First, I definitely want Siri to feel a lot more conversational and adaptable, like it could actually understand the context of what I'm asking and not just handle one fixed command at a time. I'd also hope for a lot more seamless integration with all the apps and services I use. So if I'm in China, I want it to work smoothly with local apps and not just the global ones. And of course, having that local partner model like Whiteshield's Tech would be great for making sure it understands language nuances or Journeys. And in short, I just want it to be that helpful, smart assistant that actually makes life easier rather than just doing a handful of simple things. So that'd be my wish list.
Okay, and we discussing will be the end. So very thank you. You join my kindly discussing.
You're absolutely welcome. I had a lot of fun chatting about all these topics with you. If you ever want to dive into more discussions or just chat about anything else, just let me know. Thanks for the great conversation.